We now present For the Record.
Damn, I didn't do anything.
A moment that once again shook the nation. Questions now swirling about just how effective police reform policies are after Tyre Nichols died after a police beating on January 7th in Memphis.
Tyre Nichols, say his name.
Protests erupted once again, a nation left raw and bitter with the feeling that this keeps happening again and again. George Floyd, Tyre Nichols, so many more. The question left now for police departments to answer: are policies enough?
I just want to make sure everybody understands that we are 100% committed to working with you to revise policy.
That was Memphis Police Director Mike Rawlings on June 9th, 2020, after George Floyd's murder. The department making a fresh commitment to the community to implement reforms. And that from the department's same officers almost 3 years later, leaving a question for every department: are policies enough? Welcome to a special edition of For the Record. I'm Naomi Coles. Tyre Nichols' death raises questions for every police department in the country who's willing to answer them. And this morning, we are getting those answers from 3 local police chiefs willing to discuss it. Later this half hour, I am also sitting down with 2 women of color and lawmakers in the Madison area. But first, a warm welcome to Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes, Janesville Police Chief David Moore, and Beloit Police Chief Andre Sales. Thank you all so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
We have tough questions to get through. I think we have a question first of culture, right? What we saw in the video, what we saw from the Memphis Police Department officers was something that doesn't just happen in that instant. What goes behind the scenes to create a scenario where officers feel comfortable doing that? I'll start with you.
You know, Naomi, the elephant in the room when it comes to culture is that it is very difficult sometimes to criticize police officers and police behavior. Until we create a culture where criticism is welcome and constructive criticism is welcome to move us forward, we may see additional incidences like this around the country. It's okay when you truly love something like I do. I love policing, I love my police department, but we often have very tough conversations within my police department, and it begins there. Having correct supervision is important. I know that there are many areas of police reform, but one area of police reform that should never be is decreasing the number of police officers. We need to increase the number of police officers so that we can have more supervision, more oversight of what the officers are actually doing when they're out there on the streets. The officers that are with the Madison Police Department, I truly believe, care about our community. They want to work hard. I certainly in the last 2 years have asked them to re-engage with our community after 2020. And they have done that, and I have pushed and insisted that they do that. But when something like this happens, what it does is it sets us back. But we're up to the task, and we're ready to move forward.
Chief Moore, and there's obviously a question of culture here, and culture can be a very broad term. And to some extent, there's policies that go into that create that culture, right? So, I mean, when we're talking about things like qualified immunity or the rights of a police officer when they are able to use deadly or violent force, where do you draw the line between what culture has to say and what policy has to say?
Well, I'm glad you got to culture because that is really the issue at hand, and certainly in Memphis. I can tell you that Memphis certainly has policy that says their officers should not kick a citizen in the head. They certainly have training that would indicate that that's not acceptable to kick a person in the head until they die. So training and policy is important, but you really need to look at the culture of an organization to assure that we're delivering the service that we need. It's important to hire people of character and people that truly care about one another, and then surround those officers with an organization that believes in respect for our citizens and respect for and treating people fairly and protecting our citizens. If you get those 2 pieces right, your rules and training will come into play very well. But if you're not hiring the right people and you're not bringing them into an organization that truly cares about their citizens, it's going to be very difficult.
Chief Sales, one of the things that the family of Tyre Nichols said that they were grappling with is the fact that their black son was killed by 5 black officers. And I think that raises such a sensitive question. This often becomes a question of race or skin color, but it's obviously much larger than that. How are you grappling with that yourself and your department?
So the first thing was it took me about 48 hours to actually watch the video. It came out on that Friday, and it was Sunday before I actually forced myself to watch that video. And for so long in policing, the African American community or community of colors always asked and wanted police officers that looked like them, and believed that in those situations, the situation would be a little bit less of a fight. And it's unfortunate that when we are lucky enough to get this job, we tarnish the badge by doing something like that. And it goes into the stigma of African American men being so overly aggressive. They're just feeding into that stigma. And it's very unfortunate to see that. As a black man myself and having 3 black sons, it makes me think about what may happen to them when there's a traffic stop. What's going on in their heads? What are they thinking? Because they look at their father and they look at my friends and they say, these are good police officers. But I don't know this police officers that's walking up to my vehicle. Are they going to take advantage of me and take advantage of my rights that I have as a citizen of the United States? It's very unfortunate that we had to watch that. And I think it's a situation to where we can't always put the race into it. We have to say that these were 5+ more police officers that were bad characters. It's that 1% in our law enforcement family that gives us that bad name. And we have to look at that, and sometimes it's hard to take the color aspect out of it. And we need to talk about that. I know we talk about that at the Beloit Police Department. Every Wednesday we have courageous conversations with our staff members, and we talk about race in regards to policing. What does it look like? How do we get there? And how do we make our police department reflect our community? But at the same time, though, we have to say that these are 5 bad guys that did something horrendous on that day, and take them as those individuals that's going to be incarcerated for the rest of their life, I hope.
I want any of you to weigh in here. What have your officers told any of you about what they thought when they saw that video?
Well, for me, it's tremendous frustration. You know, I ask my officers to do a lot, and they do it with a smile on their face because they really want to serve the community. But that frustration of here we go again, having to start the conversation all over again, having to justify, having to go to a family function and have people walk up to you and go, hey, what about this video? You know, some officers don't even want to go to family functions after these things happen because they have to find themselves in a position to explain away behavior that they would never do or be involved in. And I think that's very, very important because the officers communicating to me that they're fed up with this type of behavior, the officers communicating to me that they don't want bad police officers, lets me know that we're on the right track here in the Madison Police Department.
The officers I spoke to, it was pretty straightforward. How can this be that the actions by those officers are so foreign to the type of policing that we have here in Wisconsin and with these agencies? It's really hard to grasp how we can have 5 police officers act in a criminal way. That wasn't police process that we witnessed. That was a criminal act, and it's hard to understand how that can be, which gets us right back to that culture and who are we hiring and what kind of organization are they in that would allow something like that to happen. Those officers didn't start there that day. I'm sure there were plenty of warning signs leading up until that event that should have told that organization that there's a problem there.
Chief Sales, these officers were part of a so-called Scorpion unit, a specialized unit, excuse me. Does this speak to a problem particularly with specialized unit that might feel like they can go farther than the average officer?
I think when you look at the specialized units, who's supervising you? And when you look at that situation, and if I can recall in my brain, I don't think I've seen a supervisor on scene. You have 5 police officers, and we have policy and procedure set up in our police department. If there's 3 or more officers on a scene, a sergeant shall be there. And that's where these individuals repeatedly, probably throughout their career in that unit, were doing things similar to that but didn't reach the point where somebody died because they had a lack of supervision and they had a lack of basically empathy for their community members in Memphis, and those situations happen. We have our violent crime interdiction team in the city of Beloit, but it's a sergeant and a lieutenant that oversees that team, and there's someone with them at all times. We talk to them about constitutional laws that they need to be aware of and understanding that they're going to be in high stress situations, but at the same time though, they have to be calm and they have to be able to allow that person to have that procedural justice to give their reason of why, what's going on, and what happened before they get there. I'm for specialty units, but at the same time, though, you have to have correct supervision in those specialty units.
Chief Barnes, in our last couple minutes, what would you say to the people who say this is not an issue of culture, this is not an issue of policy, this is an issue of a broken system?
I would say that it's a combination of all of that. The system certainly is broken when in certain places you expect an outcome. You expect that if a citizen were to hurt someone, that citizen will be held accountable. But we've seen throughout the country when officers sometimes hurt people, they're not held accountable, or at least not at the same rate. We want to make sure that the system is fair for everyone. So I would agree, it's a mix of both. But I do think that the part of culture, it has to begin there. And what you are allowed to accept and what you're not allowed to accept. And somehow, in this particular case, that behavior was accepted. And I hope that they do a Sentinel event review similar to what we did here with the Control Center and how we looked at 2020 to see if there's a pattern and practice of behavior, because it shouldn't stop just with this particular case.
In our last minute or so, Chief Moore, Chief Sales, anything either of you would like to add?
I think one of the biggest things is with reform, I think you have 3 chiefs up here that have very similar thought processes of what a police department should look like. And I think we hold our officers accountable, and our officers hold us accountable to make sure that we're going out and respecting our community members. I think the biggest thing is you're seeing a lot of processes done quicker instead of the 6 months, 8 months, 9 months work before a person receives discipline. We're on it a lot quicker. We're understanding what we need to do as a police profession to get that respect back, and we have to earn that respect back. And I think over the years, there's a lot of bad characters that have tarnished this badge and made the respect of police officers lessened.
We don't wait for a bad incident to occur in our organization. I have a group that is called our Dynamic Training and Policy Group. It is a lieutenant, a sergeant, and many trainers within the organization, and we're watching what's going on a national level. And when we see incidents like Memphis and Uvalde and Los Angeles and Akron, Ohio, we research those incidents and determine what didn't go well there. And then we come back and look at our training, our policy, and our equipment and see what changes we can make based on those events that happened sometimes far, far away from us, but to assure that we're providing the best service we can for our communities.
To each of you, thank you so much for being willing to tackle this for each of your communities and, frankly, all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, from another perspective, lawmakers and what they have to say about the system itself.